Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili Gianarakos, back for another episode. My friend, how are you?
I'm excited, Yariv. We had some hockey over the weekend in terms of rookie games, and we have training camp starting on the 21st. So that's just in a couple days here. We're officially back into the thick of things for hockey season. So it's good that there's, going to be consistent news and Flyers news to discuss moving ahead. Whereas, the past summer, once it hits that August lull, it's a little bit tough for us to kind of find some topics. But how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, dude. You nailed it. We're getting tired of repeating ourselves on every episode. I think we did all right trying to find some topics within there, but now we actually have like real things to talk about. We actually have a full slew of things to talk about today. Before we get started, just want to remind everybody to please like, subscribe, share us out if you can, leave us comments. All the comments that coming in is awesome. Trying to read all of them, trying to respond to all of them. You guys are amazing for interacting with us. It's super fucking awesome. I'm part of my French. Yeah, I gotta learn to stop cursing. And really, really appreciate you guys doing that. Again, hit the bell for notifications to be reminded. We release episodes typically around midnight. So they're ready for you guys in the morning, regardless of your time zone. But really appreciate you guys doing that. Again, shout out to Jim Steaks on 4th and South. Keep them in your hearts and mind. I believe they're opening soon. I keep forgetting to check. I'll follow up on that eventually. But again, Jim Steaks on 4th and South. They're still out there. We're still doing the ads for free. We told them we would support them all through after their fire. So again, when they are open, make sure to go to Jim Steaks, go get a cheesesteak. I'm sure they're gonna have a line out the door when they're ready. We got a lot to talk about today. A lot. I'll go through some of the topics and we'll dig into it. So we're going to talk about, we'll talk about a topic that I kind of came up with about depth and being the essence of championship. And I want to use the Aaron Rodgers situation as an example. We'll give a little update on Michkov. We have the Schenn Pinto rumors. We have the Brent Flahr presser that happened a couple days ago, I think 2 days ago. Then we had we had the contract of Matt Brown. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the Briere presser that happened today as we're recording this. He gave us a lot of good nuggets in there. We got a lot to go through there. Actually, right before we hopped on this podcast, Vasili shot me a message. The Flyers training camp schedule and roster was released, so we'll go through that as well. We will touch on the Babcock issue as well, even though that's kind of wrapping up. I think we still have a little bit more to say there. And then a Brayden Schenn update at the end of this, which is just a little bit of information for everybody else. So first, I do want to remind everybody, we'll touch on I just want to remind everybody we did do a rookie game review. It's on both games. The video came out a couple days ago. Just make sure to check back. That has a lot of the in-depth analysis of that game. But we're obviously going to kind of rehash some of that stuff today. Okay, so let's get into it. So this is one thing I wanted to talk about before we get into like full-on Flyer stuff. I wanted to talk about this concept of, I want to remind us as we kind of go into the season here, right? Like Sean Couturier is coming back. You know how high Vasili and I are on him and how much of an impact he makes on our team. And even obviously there's Cam Atkinson. He should be a pretty big impact too. But I want to remind people as we go through this, I was, for those who don't follow football, those who don't follow the Jets, I'm not a huge football fan. I've been watching more and more kind of as I've been getting older. But, I think about this Aaron Rodgers situation, right? And if you don't know anything about the New York Jets, they are more of a cursed team than the Flyers have been. Like, people call Philly cursed. We are nowhere near as cursed as the Jets, right? They have struggled immensely. And this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs, I believe, for 11 years. And they missed the playoffs last season too. They go out, they sign Aaron Rodgers. They add a couple more really good players. And, all you hear from their fan base is championship, championship, championship. And like, don't get me wrong, I understand Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame player. He's 39, but he's still a Hall of Fame player. But I want to remind people that sports, especially football, especially hockey, ones that really require large lineups, you will not, the hubris to go from we haven't made the playoffs to 11 years to start talking about winning the Super Bowl, to make that kind of leap in progress is, you are kidding yourselves. The fact that they were even talking about a championship, they should have just been begging for the playoffs with that kind of thing. And this is something I want to talk about for us too. And I want to bring up Michkov within this also. And I'll let you respond to this in a second here, Vasili. I want to bring up Michkov because you know how high we are on him. Vasili and I, we cannot stop talking about it. The whole city. Everybody knows this kid's skill set. Same with Cutter Gauthier. But I want people to put the brakes on the excitement of what a great player does an impact to your team. Sure, Connor Bedard could come into Chicago and they will clearly be highly energized with this player, but he will not be turning their entire franchise around in 1 year. We have seen this with McDavid. You cannot put too much of your hopes in one guy. This is a team sport, and I would much rather have a team full of great players than have a top-heavy team on defense and offense. You can see it almost every season. The team that has depth wins championships. I even remember back in the day when I was watching Germany win the World Cup in soccer. I easily predicted that because all I did was look at their roster and be like, oh, they have the deepest team in the tournament. They're going to win. And again, it's not that hard to predict because if they have injuries, if somebody struggles, you rotate in another good player. It's the same reason why the Boston Bruins, I'm sure they're being counted out by people. I would not. That team knows how to do the next man up thing. The New England Patriots did that, right? That's how they built those championships, right? That's how they got to that point. And it's just the one thing I want to talk about is let's not put too many hopes and dreams in any one player. And let's make sure that you recognize that it will always take a full team of good to great players to win a championship. So what do you think about what I'm saying?
Yeah, I really agree with a lot of the points that you made there, Yariv. I think just in terms of team building in general, and this isn't even in sports, but I think it's just in any facet, it's a very iterative process. It's something you're usually working towards building upon throughout several years to kind of get to your end goal, right? So if you look at, the Flyers drafting these types of high-end players like a Gauthier, 2 drafts ago, like a Michkov, even like, an Oliver Bonk, and even any of the prospects essentially within the pipeline here, it's all like a consolidation of every single one of those players together that's going to end up building a championship team right down the line here. And I think one thing too to really remember is even with the likes of Couturier coming back and Atkinson coming back, and we point out to everybody like the impact that Couturier can have on a lineup, the impact that 2 veteran players that have had very successful seasons in the NHL can have, especially on a struggling team that the Flyers were last season. Like there will be a large impact, but even with those guys, like they're not going to pull them out of the depths of like, let's say, the very bottom of the league, right? Like there might be improvement in terms of like 5 to 7 to maybe 8 spots potentially, but they're not going to shoot them up to perennial playoff contender without even more additions. So I think that's just something to kind of remind people that it's something to be excited about, and even with these younger players, something to be excited about because they're very, very talented, and talented players make a team better. But you have to continue to add on, and I think that's what Briere and company are kind of focused towards doing, especially based on the press conference that Briere had earlier today, and we'll get into all that later on. But essentially, I think the team is set towards that rebuilding mindset at this point. And they want to kind of gauge it and go forward in a way where, the team is still trying to be competitive and get better because that's important for their young players to develop. But they're also allowing enough opportunity for their young guys to continue to do that too. And that's something that, the coaching staff has to kind of carve out for them this season. But just to go back to it, like I do 100% agree that in any facet, any sport, not just one player is going to bring a team a championship or bring a team continued success. One player can have a big impact, but it's going to be a group of really good players together, probably having more sustained success than, as you said, like a top-heavy rotation of forwards or a top-heavy rotation of defensemen, for example.
Yeah, and you can even look at the Philadelphia Eagles, for those who are listening to this, right? Who did they win the championship with? They didn't win with an all-time great quarterback. In fact, their starting quarterback got hurt. It was the fact that team was so deep, so strong overall that made
talent at all positions. Exactly.
That's what made attack from all angles. And look, if you have a pretty good team, like let's say you're a team that's been stuck in the second round, and then you bring in a superstar, then I understand the conversations about a championship, right? Oh, now we have that extra X
There's
factor.
different ways to go about it, right? Like you don't always have to start necessarily with, okay, we need to build up a base of really good players, and we can never have that bona fide superstar. I think like if let's say you had that base, like you're saying, and then you add that superstar player later, then that player could potentially push you over the top.
Yeah.
But I do think that let's say all you have is, let's say you have your 1C and a really good scoring winger and a good 2C, and then you have one maybe really top defenseman in the league, and the rest of your defense course kind of mediocre. That's not enough to push you across the finish line, right? Like you might be on playoff contention territory year to year, but you're going to need more depth overall. I mean, just look at Vegas, right? And their lineup,
Exactly.
and how many changes they've made over the years to finally get to that Stanley Cup winning lineup, because they had good teams since they entered the league, but they didn't stop them from changing their lineup throughout the process. So
yeah, because again, if you were relying on one player the way the Jets are, right, and they're heartbroken about that, and understandably so. This is not to mock Jets fans. I totally understand where they're coming from, right? He was a sign of hope for that team, and do I believe he would have made them a playoff team? Probably, right? But I hear them talking about championship and stuff. It's like, how do you expect to win a championship where you never even got to the first round and you haven't even beaten a first round team? Right now, they lose their quarterback. They get spanked the second game, right? It's like it didn't change their whole organization overnight. And even if you look at Tampa Bay, it wasn't just Brady, right? He brought in Gronk. He changed the entire atmosphere of the team. The team started getting better and better. And that's still like an anomaly. That's the best quarterback of all time. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's happened maybe a couple times throughout history, but it's pretty rare. So, like, you can't, and that goes for us, right? We're going to be adding young star players to this team over the next 2 years, especially this upcoming draft. Like, we need to realize that's why you add multiple young top players. That's why you look at all of the guys, like even like Denver Barkey, Zayd Wisdom. We'll talk about them, but you have to look at all of these guys as assets for a championship, because you're trying to build a full lineup of good players. I've always said this. There is no one recipe. The recipe is your entire lineup needs to be good to win a championship. It's
you need that foundation of just a lot of talent, and then seeing who rises out of that prospect pool, right? So that's a huge part of the rebuilding process. And I think arguably with, the assets they have, the Flyers are kind of in that kind of process right now. So,
yeah. And I actually, and if you look at the Flyers on paper, with all the doom and gloom and all that around that, there are a bunch of names. And you watch that rookie game, I want to talk about why the Flyers lost that game. We'll talk about that in a little bit, or those games. But, there are talent kind of without that. A lot of people who are younger watching this, you don't remember the days where Mike Testawide was our top prospect, a guy who was a free agent NCAA player. There was nothing in the pool behind him. That was at the end of the Holmgren era, where there's
Richards
nothing
Carter
in the pool.
Era.
Right. And if you look at the Richards Carter era, like naming the best player on that team, you can't. I guess you can say it was Chris Pronger, right? The legendary guy. He was the icing on the cake, right? They already had a good team. They already had Coburn and Tiemann, and they added Pronger, and that's what elevated them. And they still struggled during the season, right? And they didn't have a goalie. They had 3 goalies, one of which that went down in Ray Emery. And then Leighton and Boucher, who were good backups, right? It required depth to even get to that point. So I just want to remind people that when you guys see teams add that one player and they're not that good, and you see fan bases kind of, oh my God, we're going to be one of the best teams. No, you're not. No, you're not, because that's not the way it works. And we see what happened to the Edmonton Oilers. Now it took years, and Vasili said it perfectly, through iteration and constantly adding. Now the Edmonton Oilers are an actual dangerous team. On a regular basis, they're a playoff team. And I still think maybe they're missing one more key asset, but it wasn't enough to have Draisaitl and McDavid, right? If you look at the Penguins of the past, it wasn't just Crosby and Malkin that made that team great. They had plenty of players that would spank the Flyers. Even Max Talbot played well against us, right? He was a really good bottom 6 forward. You need guys all throughout your lineup that can step up and have big moments. And I just want to make that clear to people as we kind of evolve this team. Never put your hopes too much in one player. Ever, ever. Even the Oilers won after they traded Gretzky. You know what I mean? They won a championship and used that depth. We traded for Eric Lindros to the Quebec Nordiques, who eventually ended up becoming the Colorado Avalanche. They used everything we gave them, which was a slew of good players, plus Peter Forsberg, plus cash back in the day, to build a dynasty that we did not have and that they had in the end because they had more depth than the Flyers. And I just want everybody to remember that we can still be a great team without having the best players in the league. All right, let's go on to the next one. And this one's a quick update, but we thought it was pretty interesting. And shout out to Alex Appleyard. Do you have the tweet up by any chance?
Yeah, sure. I can pull that up.
You want to give them the news on Michkov?
Yeah. So basically, in terms of Matvey Michkov, Match TV had an interesting interview with Michkov the other day, and shout out to Appleyard, Alexander Appleyard, on Twitter for kind of putting this out there. But basically, one of the main parts of the interview was that he actually passed Russian university entry exams, and he's seemingly going to enroll himself in university. And it's really important because if you look at the whole Fedotov situation, him having to complete his military service, Michkov, passing these exams and being able to enter here, alluding that he's going to sports university, means that there will be no military service for him because of doing that. So I don't think a lot of us probably were aware that was even an option. Not. Yeah, in terms of how it works with the Russian military service. So I guess it's a good way for Michkov to kind of get out of that. And honestly, I think for any professional athlete pursuing any type of further education is probably a good thing to do. And it's a good thing for Michkov to be able to have that opportunity to, go to university or sports university, as what they're calling it here. But, that's great for him. And I think it's obviously good for the Flyers that they don't have to deal with another, Fedotov type of situation where potentially he could get sent for military service, let's say, at any point in the next 3 years, or maybe even after his contract expired. So.
Yeah, and let's hope that that's not in his future. And again, I hope for peace overall. I'll just, without any geopolitics involved. I don't want to see it affect anybody or anyone's lives in general more than it already has. So, I think it's just good news. I mean, it's good for him to get an education at some point. It shows kind of where his head is at. He's kind of thinking ahead already. I hope that, that came from the people in his life, right? I know his father's not around now, but I hope that the people in his life are guiding him in the right direction to do things like this, to protect yourself from the draft, from career-ending injury, whatever it is that happens to him, right? I just think it's a nice piece of news for Flyers fans, some reassurance that he's not going to be, pulled into the military of some sort. Again, I don't anticipate any of that stuff with Michkov, but I think it's still a nice piece of news, and it's good to see that he's moving himself forward. So far in 3 games, he has 3 assists in the KHL. So I think it's a pretty good start. He's a +1. I saw him listed as 147, 5'10", 147 pounds. And I just want to say there's no way that's true. I'm 147 pounds.
Maybe it's
at 5'7".
Maybe it's a typo. Like maybe it was supposed to be 187, 177 or something.
I think the last time he probably got weighed by anybody who's controlling Hockey DB was probably when he was like a teenager, probably pre-war. But yeah, realistically, that's probably not the case. But still, as we wait for him to evolve, I think this is just a good piece of news, right? Just some positive news overall.
Yeah, just to finish off on Michkov, HC Sochi played a game yesterday that they won. And he had 15:41 of ice time in that game, got 1 assist, 3 shots on goal, 1 hit, 2 block shots. So he now has 3 assists in 3 games playing for Sochi. So obviously, as he continues to play, he continues to score here and obviously make an impact for them. And it's kind of funny because HC Sochi, since he's joined, I believe, are on a 3-game win streak, and SKA is on a 4-game losing streak, and they haven't been able to score a lot of goals. So yeah, in a sense, but it's just funny that, a team that's struggling in SKA to score loans away a dynamic player that typically, can contribute and produce offense for you. So I just thought that was the irony there is just really funny to me.
That's too sweet, actually. I'm really happy that you brought that update. And for those who are not aware, the second game, I can't remember exactly who they played. He didn't have a point in the game, but he had 10 shots on net. So, yeah.
And in his first game, he had, I believe, 2 assists. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, even in the game that he didn't score, 10 shots on net's insane. Again, the kid shoots from everywhere, so don't be too concerned with stats, but the fact that he's starting off as a point per game in the KHL as an 18-year-old kid, that's not a thing there. There aren't really point per game players in the KHL. So remember that it's very rare to see guys producing at a point per game pace, even at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Most guys are like 0.5, 0.67, 0.7,
Yeah.
0.8 per game. That's a star in that league. So I assume that he will keep that up and his numbers will continue to rise as the season goes on. All right, let's get into the next topic. This is a rumor that was going around. It's still going around. I'd say mostly driven out of Canada, but there is truth to the rumor. So Shane Pinto, his name is out there. Those who are not aware, he's a young former first round pick of the Ottawa Senators. He had 20 goals last year. So this is a guy who obviously has somewhat of a high ceiling, whether it be a second line player. I don't know if he projects to be a first line player, but definitely second line, middle six type of forward with really good size at 6'3". There are rumors that the Flyers are involved in a trade potentially, trade negotiations. Let's say that. The rumor, now that it's out there, I can say it. That Morgan Frost is one of the names that obviously has been kind of going out there. I can't 100% confirm everything, but I will tell you that Vasili and I knew about that a few days before it was even before it came out. But as you guys know, I hate rumors. I don't spread rumors. But now that it's already out there, we can acknowledge it. That is what we heard as well from the sources that we have. I'm sure that there's truth for it because the value lines up. Two former late first round picks around the same age, both have a high ceiling. Both, Ottawa's having trouble kind of meeting the cap compliance. And right now, Shane Pinto is not at training camp. So it is interesting. I wouldn't say that trade option is done. Maybe there would be more pieces involved in that. But I think in that case, it would be more of a 1-for-1 swap, an equal value type of thing. But I don't know. I'm not really in the mindset that it's going to happen. I'm kind of assuming that Frost will be here with the Flyers kind of moving forward, and Shane Pinto probably will get a deal done with them at some point. And if he is traded, I do understand why the Flyers wouldn't be involved. He does seem like a guy that Tortorella would like.
Yeah, no, of course. I think Pinto, I mean, he has more of a tenacious aspect to his game in the sense
Yeah.
of like more of a forechecking north-south type of player, which I mean, obviously that's Tortorella's preference. Frost is more of that playmaker, east-west, using a lot more of the creative aspects to create his offense. But I think, I mean, we even talked about this kind of off the air that in terms of what the Flyers need personally, I think that Frost's skill set is probably more conducive to what they're lacking in this lineup, which is a playmaking center who can kind of create offense for others around him. Whereas, not to say Pinto cannot do that, but I think his skill set is less conducive to that than Frost's. But yeah, with the Pinto rumors, I did write a piece for Daily Faceoff, kind of going over the fact that he was not listed on the training camp roster this morning. So on that 56 player camp roster, Pierre Dorian, the Sens GM, confirmed that they're still in negotiations, and he's trying to sign him essentially as quickly as he can so he can continue to participate in camp, and that makes sense. Obviously, young 22-year-old, you want him to continue his development without a lot of kind of interruptions, and missing training camp can really set back a young player to begin a season. But it's interesting because obviously you have Frost as the late round pick, first round pick, and then you have Pinto very similarly as the 32nd pick in 2019. And Ottawa only has $895,000 of cap space available, and I believe his entry level deal was valued at $925,000, and he had 20 goals in his rookie year. So chances are he's going to want a considerable increase from that number. So that's where the trade rumors kind of come out of, right? Because if you can't, find the money to sign him, then you could potentially trade him. And it was reported by, Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts that the Flyers made an offer, and it would have seen Matthew Joseph come back as well. And that would have been a salary dump on Ottawa's end. And essentially, the ball from now is in Ottawa's court here. But it's not to say that this isn't going to happen, but it seems like Ottawa's kind of leaning towards signing him. So who knows, right? If this is something that the Senators kind of maybe we're entertaining to kind of get things finished here, or there's like a leverage play in order, right? Because if you look at it, I mean, the player is concerned about getting traded, then he eventually signs for a lesser amount, maybe. Ultimately, I think the most likely outcome is they end up trading like a Joseph or one of those other players, maybe that are a higher salary to free up some more money, and then eventually sign Pinto. But
Move a
there's
pick with
no,
money type of thing, right?
yeah, exactly. Like there's no telling if the trade could eventually happen. Like talks end up cooling off and resuming all the time. So who knows like how it goes. But I would imagine just based on his age, that Ottawa would want to keep him and sign him. But I think it would be an interesting swap. And I think if you were going to trade Morgan Frost, this would be something that
It
I
would
would
be the
be
right type. Yeah, it would be the
yeah,
right
this would be
type of
something that
trade.
I'd be interested in, right? And I agree with what you said there, Yariv, in terms of like this being the right type of trade because, okay, sure, you're trading Frost, who has a bit of a different skill set, but then you're also recouping an asset who's even younger, and who also has similar type of potential. Albeit it might be more of like a third line center, grittier type of role, but maybe that's what the Flyers are looking for versus what Frost can bring potentially. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting rumor, but I think at this point it's probably safe to expect that Pinto will likely remain with the Senators unless something goes awry and they're really so far apart in the numbers, right?
Yeah, and I just want to bring up the point that I brought up when Morgan Frost was going through his contract negotiation, how he didn't have leverage because the Flyers had cap space. He's a restricted free agent. They can wait all season. They're not competitive, so they don't care. They'll wait you out, right? You're the one losing because you're missing out on training camp. In Pinto's case, to some degree, that's the same. To some degree, they do have leverage there. It's not they have zero leverage with Pinto, right? But I did bring it up that if Frost would be going into the season without a contract, that he would be involved in trades, right? Immediately. Because at a certain point, you're kind of backed up against the wall as a team, and you're like, okay, well, that's one of our levers to pull is to trade you, right? And I said that if Frost didn't come in into a number that they thought was reasonable, they would move him. And it shows that they obviously don't want to move Shane Pinto, but if you put a team in a corner like that, they will move you if they have to, right? And
Yeah.
it is a definite possibility. They don't want to move him, but you cannot allow players to dictate your roster ever because go back to the first point we made on this podcast, you need an entire team of good players, right? Not just one, and they are ready to compete, right? They are a team that invested and took another leap, right? They are a team that expects to be better this year. So they want him in camp, right? They want him there early. So I do overall think that, I think they will probably get a deal done with him because I think they value him, and a rookie scoring 20 goals is no joke, right? It doesn't mean he's going to be a 40-goal scorer in the league, but it clearly shows that he has value to that team and he fits. Having said that, if you look surface level on Frost, you could also make the same argument with Frost if you're not really involved in what's going on with the team, on an intimate basis. So I just think it's interesting. Definitely something for us to keep an eye on as Flyers fans. The Flyers are going to be looking to make more trades. And Frost's name probably will continue to come up in a lot of ways because of his relationship with Tortorella is not, he doesn't have the same buy-in that Noah Cates does, right? Like if
Yeah.
somebody said that the Flyers are going to move Noah Cates, I honestly would ignore the rumor unless it was
Yeah.
a superstar
But
player.
I think it also depends too for Frost because like let's say he starts the season off very consistent and kind of picking up where he left off, then I think maybe
Yeah.
Tortorella rethinks just his whole kind of approach to Frost, his game, and what he thinks he can ultimately top out as. So that's something to keep an eye on too, I think. So
Yes.
that'll be
No,
interesting.
absolutely. And great point. That's the one thing I always say, like about Tortorella. And again, I don't know him personally. It's just what I gather from far away and what I've seen with his roster decision making is there's always room for redemption under Tortorella. Um, Different from Babcock, and we're going to talk about him at the end. Where and you guys will hear comparisons with Babcock and Torts. I do not think they are the same thing at all. I think Torts is just a hard ass. Like that's it. Like the guy just is demanding and he's super open, and honest about his emotions. That is very different than what you see with Babcock. Having said that, some players never really, grow on coaches, but we have examples from the past of Cam Atkinson, Scott Hartnell, guys who said that they had these tension moments with Tortorella, and that went away, right? So that redemption is always open for a guy like Tortorella, and I think that is personally, with not trading for Pinto, the best case scenario for the Flyers is that Frost comes in, hits the ground running, and gets Tortorella to buy in on his game and his potential, and he uses him similar to the way he did at the end of the season, and we watch his game evolve. I always prefer to develop in-house, watch our draft picks build up rather than to trade them away and hope that the other guy, because there's a inherent risk there too, that maybe, Frost could have a higher ceiling than Pinto. On surface level, maybe not, because Pinto came in, red hot, but he didn't have the injury woes that Frost had. He didn't have that history. His team was better than the Flyers, right? The Ottawa Center is clearly better than the Flyers right now. They're further along. They have real leadership, especially now they have our former captain in Claude Giroux, right? It's like, I just don't think it's exactly the same. And ultimately, I'd prefer to keep the guy with speed and playmaking skills. And like Vasili said, something this team doesn't have enough of right now, which is the first time in a long time that we could say that. All right. Let's get into our next topic. So Brent Flahr had a press conference day after, I think it was Sunday, right? Day after the second rookie game. And there were some interesting tidbits in that one. I think the more interesting presser was the Briere presser. But the one thing that stuck out to me, and we did have a comment, and I told myself I would look up the name, and I realized I totally forgot. And I'll see if I can find it here real quick. But something I wanted to point out, which I think was the most interesting thing, and kind of shame on me for not looking into this after the game happened, because if you watch the way that the Flyers played in this game, they definitely got outmuscled in the offensive zone. They got kind of thrown around. It's not that they got outplayed severely. If you even look at the shots in the second game, the Flyers severely outshot the Rangers rookies. But what really stuck out was the physicality, the ability to stay in the zone, the ability to kind of fight off your opponent, to have the strength to get the shots through. And you look at the ages, and this is something Brent Flahr brought up. Their players were older. They were 23, 24, 25. Yeah. And I talk about this all the time. And this, again, I don't care who's arguing with me. I stand by that. Young players do not have an advantage in the NHL. Veterans do. And you could see the simple case. I don't think the Rangers had more talent than the Flyers rookies. I don't think it was a talent issue at all. I think it was a development and physical maturity issue. And I think it really showed. And I think that's why a guy like Zayd Wisdom, who is physically mature beyond his years, right? And also he looked fantastic. I do want to say that, he deserves the credit, but he fit into that game, both games, perfectly. He had no problem in these games at all, because he already plays with an edge. He's already strong, very strong for his size, something we saw in his rookie year with the AHL, where he was able to walk into the AHL and play against men. This is already his advantage. And I think that's really why we got our butts kicked, is they were a more mature team. And we didn't get dominated, but in those areas that the game really matters, those tough grinding moments, those shot blocks, those second chances, the ability to kind of wrap around the boards and continue moving. If you guys rewatch those games, which I did, it's very noticeable. Like, it was in and out, in and out, in and out. And that a lot of that comes from the lack of maturity from the Flyers rookies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up, that Flahr mentioned that. And I mean, if you look at the games and where the Flyers kind of struggled the most, it was sustained offensive pressure, right? And in my opinion, if let's say you're lacking physical maturity, as a lot of those younger guys that were kind of making their debuts here for the Flyers were, it's hard to pin down as an 18-year-old, a 23-year-old defenseman on the boards and battle for the puck with him successfully and win that puck battle, just because due to the fact that 23-year-old is so much more physically mature than that individual who's 18. It makes a ton of sense. So that great point to bring up there, Yariv. Another thing that I thought was interesting from Flahr's press conference was just a little tidbit about Michkov. Flahr was asked about Michkov being loaned to Sochi. He mentioned that he was getting frustrated not playing, but Michkov was ultimately a pro about it, and that he's a very focused young man. So of course, and like, him not playing is going to frustrate him. Yeah. But Michkov's happy to be playing right now, wherever that opportunity was for him in the KHL. And even the Flyers kind of relayed those sentiments, and Flahr relayed that too, that, no matter where he's playing, SKA, Sochi, they just want him to play, right? And that's something that we kind of mentioned as well, that even though Sochi, is the weaker team, It's not looking like that right now, actually, in terms of the wins and losses, which is kind of funny. But it's just important for a young player who's 18 years old like Michkov to continue to develop his game. And without the adequate playing time and, being scratched so often on Ska, that wasn't going to happen. So,
Yeah, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just want to add that he mentioned that Michkov is like on a roster of 40 players. He's like he's like a high end scorer in the league, and dumped down into a roster of 40 players where he's just like, yeah, it was a little bit illogical, right? And we
yeah.
understand that. And we talked to our audience about why. I'm sorry. Did you want to finish that point? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, nothing like that. And then one thing I did want to mention too, Flair talked about Alexei Gendron and really liked his speed and his shot, and obviously that he needs to work on the other aspects of his game now. Shout out
Strength.
to one of strength exactly, and then just the defensive side I think too. But shout out
Yeah.
to one of our listeners. I forget the commenter's name, but they actually mentioned because we were talking about Gendron, being having an AHL debut coming up here, but he actually will go back to juniors. He'll go back to the QMJHL because he's actually still only 19. He's a late birthday. It's December 30th, I believe, something like that. So he'll be
Mm.
returned due to that because 19-year-olds, due to the agreement with the CHL right now, cannot play in the AHL.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. So shout out to whoever made that comment. I'm sorry I didn't look your name up, but
Yeah,
thanks obviously
should have
for
done that.
kind of reminding us there. And yeah, it makes sense because I do remember that Shane Wright had a similar situation, right? Where this season he's actually going to be exempted from playing in the CHL just because he's played so often and played so well there for his team in the past. So his team is kind of, and the CHL are exempting him from having to play there as a 19-year-old. He's actually going to be able to play in the AHL. So that's very rare. Obviously, Gendron's not going to get the same exemption there as Wright, just due to the kind of differences in the pedigree. So that's something, that's kind of unfortunate because I was
He's
looking
gonna have
forward.
like 80 goals this year over there.
Yeah, I was looking forward to him kind of ripping it up in the AHL or seeing
Yeah.
potentially if he could, make a transition to being a goal scorer at the AHL level. But yeah, after getting like 55 goals in 53 games in the Q last season, I wonder what his production is going to be like this year.
I wonder if that, I don't want to say it's going to hamper his development because even if you watch that game, while he had a ton of speed coming in, he would get kind of thrown to the side, during a lot of those plays by the bigger, stronger defensemen. You're not going to be getting away with just pure speed and shot if you can't fight for space on the ice. So I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessarily a bad thing he goes there, but I was hoping that he'd be playing in the AHL. I actually didn't realize that at all until you just told me. So it's a little disappointing, but nothing to be worried about. And again, I think the Flyers roster is relatively full, and we'll talk about Matt Brown too, and
Yeah.
he's going to be filling that void most likely.
And too, like with the QMJHL season and everything like that, they usually end typically before the AHL NHL season.
Yeah,
So once that ends and he's
he'll be
20,
coming over,
you'll see him at the end of the year.
and
So it might not
probably in
be a
the
bad thing,
playoffs.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So he'll
it's a
still
great.
get some AHL time there, which is good.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Especially because he's gonna be older and let him work. He's not ready. Like I agree with you because we were talking about through text and you mentioned immediately like I really like the way Gendron looks. The guy looks fast. Like
Yeah.
he's a better skater than I anticipated. Which is really good and plays like he has that high end offensive touch. If he can round out the rest of his game, he's not going to be able to play under Tortorella the way his game is right now. And even Lappy would probably be harsh on him because Lappy does look for that as well. We saw Hayden Hodgson get a bunch of time, right? Guys who are just physical. So maybe in the end, this will be best for him, especially because he's young for his age, like you're saying. So I think it's a good one. The other thing I want to note, and this is something, we talked about, I really wanted to see Emil Andre play with Oliver Bonk. And hearing what Flair had to say, that Andre actually got stuck in customs because issues with his passport, that he actually didn't make it in time really to be ready for that first game. That's why he didn't play in both games, which I thought was really interesting that he pointed that out because, we'll go through Briere's presser. I mean, it's obvious that the Flyers are super high on him, and it sucks because I really wanted to see an Emil Andre, Oliver Bonk pairing because that would have been like a true top pairing for that young core. Where they really didn't have that at any point in any one of those games. Like they had a good mix, but they didn't have like a top pairing really to carry them outside of having their best defenseman of each group in that game. I would have loved to see them both together. So just, for those who are unaware of that, I wasn't aware of it until he made the announcement at the press conference, right? So he missed that game because I think the Flyers wanted him in both, the same way they wanted Brink and Forrester and Denoyer, right? The guys who have that NHL level game. They wanted them to have a couple games in there. You could say the same thing about Yinning and Grons as well, but in this case, I think they wanted to see him in both games. So we were talking about that, Vasili, and I think it's just good that he addressed that because the way they're talking about Andre is absolutely a guy that they are considering to be on the brink of making the NHL.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's good to get the insight on that, just to know that, okay, he missed that first game due to those kind of passport issues that he had.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. I think like he looked poised in those rookie games. I think it's more of obviously like for those more established players getting ready for the main camp. And we can kind of address that coming up here with Briere's press conference in general.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely obvious to me that Flahr and Briere both hold him in a high regard, and I think he has a real opportunity to make it on this defense. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we'll transition to the next topic, but he did talk about Matt Brown as well. At the time, Brown didn't have a contract. I don't think. I think he got the contract the next day or maybe even that day. But so Matt Brown, who played very well, again, he's an older player. He did play some time with the AHL. Again, the older players definitely looked more ready, and he's one of them. He is a smaller player, but he inked a 2-year AHL deal. He's not playing in the NHL this year anyway, so bringing him in on an AHL deal is a very safe move because they don't really have the NHL slot to give him right now. And I love what Flahr said about him. He said he's small, but he said he's built like a tank, right? And we saw the speed was there. And I love seeing these type of guys. I don't know if he's going to produce in the NHL, but he clear cut looks like an AHL player, and this team still has a championship to win at the AHL level, right? Like there is a lot to do there, and a guy like that. Sorry, go ahead, please.
No, and I mean you're losing a guy like Anisimov, who produced really well for the Phantoms last season.
Good point.
Breaking news. Yeah, breaking news on Anisimov. He actually just signed a PTO with the Red Wings, so good luck to him. Yeah, good luck to him there. Hopefully he can maybe get back in the NHL with them. But so losing Anisimov and getting a guy like Brown, and I mean maybe that can replace some of that production. Obviously different positions. And then also to mention too, Brendan Fury, I believe he was an invite, but he also had an AHL deal, so he'll be with the Phantoms too. So that's
he also
obviously
played
a good
well
thing.
last year, very well last year.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. I mean, just for them to have those guys in the pipeline on AHL deals in a sense. So let's say they do show something and continue their good play with the Phantoms. You never know if an ELC isn't on the horizon down the line, right?
Yeah. And again, these are two guys. These are the type of guys you want to take risks on, right? Guys who showed you something at the AHL level, who are already physically developed, right? Who show sparks of anything. We talked about it last time, right? Like people want to laugh at guys like Max Willman. I see nothing funny about it. I see exceptionalism. I don't care if you were drafted or not. If you were touching the pro level at hockey, you're in the 1% hockey players in the world. They still have an opportunity to turn themselves into NHL players. And quite frankly, the way he looked in that rookie game, which should be taken with a grain of salt, for sure. But he did look impressive. And I think he deserved that AHL opportunity. And I think if they work with him a little bit more, at the very least, if he becomes a top 6 forward in the AHL for us and he's homegrown, that's pretty good. Like we got a lot of out of Max Willman. Like people might not like that, but he played well for the Phantoms. He had some good games for the Flyers. That's not worth nothing, right? In times of injuries, these guys are valuable. And
it's
even
a low risk.
Yeah, it's
a low risk, high reward, right? Like who knows if he's going to develop and become, an NHL player for you. But even like you said, if that does not happen, he can still be a contributor at the AHL level, and that's important. Right. That can help young guys even develop that, are prospects that you're looking to kind of etch into an NHL role down the line. Because if the Phantoms are more competitive, that's ultimately a better thing for your younger guys that you're trying to graduate to the NHL level in the future. So
yeah, and he has the ability to play left wing, which we were if you guys remember the episode, if you're new to the show, you can go back and watch those depth chart conversations several weeks back now. But we looked at the left side on the Phantoms, and it did look a little sparse. And I had Alexis Gendron in there, right? And he's not going to be there, right? So they do need to fill that left side with talent and guys who can play in the top six. And he seems like a really good option. And the way he was moved up the lineup, it's great, because the other guys who did well on the left side, they're not going to be here, right? Chernik, Alexei Chernik also, I thought looked really good for his age. Again, remember, age here really matters. And I thought it was really, really impressive. Another guy I do want to talk about, which I forgot to bring this up as we were talking about Brent Flahr, Denver Barkey, right? And I was rewatching the game, and everything you see, I mean, the guy is like less than 150 pounds. He is not tall. Yeah. He looks 14, like. And and they did compare him to Travis Konechny in the attitude, and that's what I noticed immediately as well. So I'm glad that they said that out loud, that it's not just my perception from far away. But I'm actually really excited about him. I don't know what he's going to turn into at this point, but when I see a guy who is that undersized, that youthful, right, in his look, because just because you hit 18 doesn't mean you're maturing at the same rate as everybody in your team. That's not real. This kid's got a lot of physical maturity left in him, and probably is a late bloomer, most likely, and why he was discussed so much, right? That's what drafts are about. It's about potential, not what they are today. And I looked at Denver Barkey, man. I am super excited about this kid. I mean, out of all the forwards, outside of Wisdom, he maybe was the most consistent one. To surprise me from game to game, to just constantly be making good plays, constantly fighting. He's kind of has it all a little bit, right? Like, he has the skill set, he's got the skating, he's got the tenacity, and he's not mature, right? And the fact that he stuck out as a guy who looks 14, it reminds me of like kind of Jeff Skinner's situation, right? Another guy who was a little bit under the radar. Obviously, he had a dip in his career. He's right back up now, which I'm happy about. I hate seeing players kind of digress, no matter what team they play for. But those guys who look like children as they come into the league, they take longer. And I think Barkey is a long-term investment that probably will pay off very nicely for the Flyers. And I could see him even in a couple of years, as he hits 20. People already start seeing maybe this guy's NHL ready. He probably won't be because of the physical maturity element, but the game might be more NHL ready than his body. And that's what really excited me. Like, he didn't look out of place with Phantoms players around him at all.
Yeah, well, you could just see the hockey IQ and the hockey sense in his game, right? Like, he's a lot smaller than a lot of those guys on the Rangers, but he's still finding a way to maneuver around them, get to pucks, getting on the forecheck. I mean, he had 2 assists, secondary assists, albeit, but still on the power play, showing some of his creative game. And it's interesting with Barkey, especially too, and taking into consideration what Flahr mentioned, that, they were really impressed with the way he played, even though, like, he's only, 5'9", 155 pounds, very, very small, and he's playing 23, 24, 25-year-olds and
playing
like
center.
one of the and playing center and looked like one of the best players for the Flyers in those rookie games. So yeah, obviously it's encouraging to see that. And even at the draft, like, when I got to ask him some questions, he stated that, his mold and what he is striving for in terms of comparisons of his game and working towards is Brayden Point. I mean, obviously that's a best case scenario for the Flyers. Point's also a former 3rd round pick. So every guy that's undersized and is 5'9" and at that size isn't going to become Brayden Point. That's not what we're trying to say. But it's something to point to say that, things like that have happened with similar players, similar size, similar skill set. I think Konechny is probably a more apt comparison, just in terms of what the ceiling might be, because, comparing a guy that just got drafted to a Brayden Point that's scoring, 90 points and 52 goals last season, I don't think it's something that we're accurately going to do here. But it's a very high projection, maybe, in terms of like the ultimate upside, if everything goes right in his game. But I think if you look at it and where they picked him, 3rd round, 95th overall, on Bob McKenzie's draft rankings, Craig Button's draft rankings, even Elite Prospects, he was ranked in the 50s, not 95th. So obviously he fell for a reason, most likely size, right? But as you see, sometimes taking a swing on those undersized guys that have skill and have speed and are smart on the ice can be a payoff. So it's encouraging to see him perform that way amongst guys that are a lot older than him. In terms of the Rangers defensemen, things like that. But we'll ultimately see, where it goes from here. But I like Barkey. I think he's really smart on the ice, and he showed a lot of the skills in these rookie games that, made him kind of enticing for the Flyers to select this past draft.
Yeah, and again, I brought this up before, but another guy that the Flyers did this with in the third round was Shane Gostisbehere, and that's a guy who was drafted. I think he was 5'9" when he was drafted. When he hit the NHL, he was 5'11". So again, some of these guys physically mature a lot later. I'm not saying that Barkey's going to be 2 inches taller. I have no idea, but the whole point is that these guys who have a lot of everything else and just lack the physical maturity, if that physical maturity catches up to their game, that's a humongous boost. And that's exactly what Vasili was saying there, right? That's why he was projected as a second round pick and taken in the third round in the end, right? He dropped because of size, not because of anything else. And obviously, if he would have been 5'11", 175, 180, this is probably not a guy who would have been available at that time. And I like that. I like those type of picks. That's, like you were saying earlier, right? It's low risk, high reward pick. Love it. All right. Let's get into the next topic, and this is Briere's presser. Briere's presser was long. It was about 22 minutes long. You can obviously find it on YouTube. There's a lot of good nuggets in there. We're not going to go through every single one of them. But the big news out of that, I'd say there's probably a few. Just to straight up, and this was kind of the sentiment. I actually don't have this in the notes here. I forgot to add it in here, Vasili, but Briere essentially says, I do have it in here, actually. Briere essentially says that he doesn't believe that this is a team to tank. Like, he's not going and telling the players, hey, you're going to be at the bottom of the league. Hey, you're not going to be good. He's not saying any of that, right? They're saying, hey, look, it's not up to us. It's up to them. And I say that all the time. And I love that he said that publicly, because it's one of those things where it's, is it really that they're going to be the worst team in the league, or they're just projected to be, right? Because there's so many question marks. That's a lot of times why teams get projected so low. So many question marks. That's risk. Risk means not a guarantee to be a good team, right? And that's why you get projected low. But not having that attitude and saying that publicly, I like that. It might not matter at the end, but I like that he's not kind of taking he's not taking anything away. There's no public message here saying, hey, we're going to be bad next year. It's kind of just, hey, patience, everyone, and let the players kind of dictate where we actually are as an organization.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point to bring up, Yariv. And it's important to mention that, because obviously going into the season, the expectations surrounding the team and where the Flyers are expected to finish are not very high. They're expected to be a bottom 10 team. And usually when you're in that realm, national media outlets and just general perception is that, oh, well, the team's looking to tank, right? Because they're bad and they want to get the best pick possible. That's not necessarily the case. And we didn't see that last season, though the Flyers weren't very good and, picked 7th overall. They weren't trying to tank. They just didn't, have the talent that you would need to propel yourself to a better finish than what they had, right? To make them better than the 7th, last team in the league. It's the same type of situation here, right? Briere states, well, the Flyers aren't tanking. The Flyers are looking to win and develop players. And I would argue that to foster the culture that you want, to foster a positive environment, you're never, as a management, going to put on your players, well, we want you to lose. We want you, to do the worst that you possibly can. That's never going to be the sentiment, especially from a professional organization, right? So, the team's going to try to win. And for them, it's important to, get their wins in, because even like Tortorella alluded to last season, those guys, like those younger players like Frost, Tippett, Cates, York, a lot of these guys and even more players are all working hard out there. They're trying to win, right? And having those young guys going through sustained loss at a very frequent rate is not good for any of their developments and any really of the young players. So it's in the Flyers' best interest to have a balance of that, right? Where like you're getting wins for your young guys to gain that experience, but also, understand what it takes to win. Because if you don't ever go through the process of winning, constant losing, it's hard to learn how to build the habits to become a winning team. Mm-hmm. And also I think in terms of, where the team's
Absolutely.
at in their rebuild in general. Losing is important too, right? Because losing is important in the sense that, okay, you can pinpoint, identify your mistakes, what you need to work on, and then use that to build up, wins in the future based off, the mistakes you were making, and then turning those mistakes into positives down the line. So I think it's good to hear Briere say that, just to know that the management isn't kind of operating in that manner, similar to like a Buffalo would have in a decade ago, right, in the same
Hmm.
type of situation. So it's good to see. And a couple other interesting tidbits I just wanted to bring up for the press conference. So Briere mentioned that he believes in the prospects and the kids essentially, but he doesn't want to put them in positions where he's kind of giving them too much to chew on, let's say, early in the career. So I think that's something to watch, especially when we look at guys like Forster, like a Desnoyers, like an
Wisdom.
Andre, Wisdom, right? So I think what that means is if guys show that they're ready in camp and that they've earned a spot, they're going to get their chance. But if they did not, and they did not impress the coaching staff in a way to do that, they're not afraid to send them back for extra seasoning in the AHL. And I mean, I look at that sentiment and that idea, and I think that's the right way to go about it. Because look at the Cam York situation last season, right? Everybody thought he was
He
ready.
brought that up.
Had a poor camp. Goes down to the AHL, plays really well all situations, comes back up and looks even better than we've seen him last time that he played in the NHL the season before. So if that's ultimately what happens, let's say a Forster, a Desnoyers, one of those guys that are on the brink here, I don't think it's a bad
And
thing for their
Brink.
development, and Brink too, yeah, to add it all in there. But I don't think it's a bad thing for their development whatsoever, because we've seen in the past that usually extra AHL time isn't going to hurt a player, but it can ultimately help them. And,
Help.
and you don't want to rush an NHL play or a prospect to the NHL just because they're getting a little bit older, right? As you all have said on this podcast before, it's not a linear thing. Sometimes it can take time and different amounts of times for certain guys. So yeah, I think that was a great thing for Briere to kind of get into, and one of the highlights for me and takeaways. A couple other ones, obviously, Sean Couturier, Cam Atkinson, they're healthy and ready to go for camp. So that's a good thing. I mean, we've seen some videos, most likely, if you've been on Twitter at all, of them kind of getting some practices in before the rookie camps and things like that and participating. So that's always good to see that those two
We
guys
kind
have
of
been.
assumed that they were 100%, right? From what we've seen.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great, right? Just to know that those guys are going in fully 100% and there's no question marks surrounding them at all. Versus last season, it was just a whole mirage of, uncertainty, right? So let's kind of flip the script a bit a year later, which is a good thing.
But
Um,
I want to add to that
sure.
before we move past the one thing he did say about Cam and Coots, and I'm sorry to cut you off. Uh, the one thing I thought was really interesting because they asked like how are they going to be effective, and I like that he went into detail there. But he brought up special teams, and we brought that up right like
Well, yeah.
immensely. He brought up the power play, he brought up the penalty kill, and he brought up face offs, and he's like those three categories will be highly affected if those two guys can continue to be healthy and that they are really 100%. And obviously, fingers crossed because we don't know how things will evolve over training camp and throughout the season, right? Anything could go wrong.
Yeah.
That's why I made that speech kind of in the very beginning. But I thought that was cool. I like that he brought that up, and it is going to be a big deal in those categories. It will be
Well,
a huge difference.
yeah, for sure. I mean, if you just look at the Flyers power play, like last in the league, essentially, for
And face
enough
offs,
and face-offs, like doing very bad.
bottom three.
And PK, I mean, they were bottom 10 as well. So all those three, there's only room but up. And getting Couturier is one of the top face-off men in the league. I mean, that's going to help them considerably in the face-off dot. Also, I'm sure will help guys like Frost and Cates, who might be able to learn from him and learn some of his tricks. Because ultimately, face-offs is a game of tricks.
And it'll help
In
us
the
with
NHL.
possession,
Yeah,
right?
that too. But I just remember last season going back, how many times with the Flyers losing a defensive zone draw and then it ends up in the back of their net. So there's an opportunity with Couturier there to kind of limit some of that. That's obviously a good thing if he's 100% healthy, ready to go there. And for power play, penalty kill, both those guys can have huge impact, especially on the PK, right? Like Couturier is one of the premier penalty killers before his injury. Same with Cam Atkinson. Adding two of those guys to, the penalty kill unit wasn't the worst. It wasn't the greatest either, but I think
Had
another
offensive
year.
spark.
Yeah, I think another year of Noah Cates on the PK, he might improve. You have Konechny and Lawton, who are a good duo, and then you add in, Atkinson and Couturier there as well. I think you could have three really solid units where you're kind of confident rolling them out, no matter the competition they're going against. And then one final thing I want to mention on Briere's presser, he kind of went through some of the rookies that he thought were really good, and
Yep.
I'll just mention who he highlighted that he thought
Sure.
stood out to him. So Zayd Wisdom, obviously, I mean, we've talked about him ad nauseum through our rookie game reviews and during this episode as well. Samu Tuamala, Alex Ciernik, Denver Barkey, Oliver Bonk, Emil Andre. He said he thought looked like a beast
Called
in
him
rookie camp.
dominant.
Dominant, yeah, exactly. Which is, I mean, if you're looking at the GM saying that, I think that kind of gives a bit of an idea into where they probably think he's going to slot in, likely on the NHL roster, unless he
Yep.
really underwhelms. And then a couple more guys he mentioned were Adam Ginning and Helge Grans.
Yep.
And I mean, the Swedish defensemen, all three of them, getting some love from Briere. So
I was thinking that you said that, and I was like, oh, it's so funny that all of the Swedish defensemen, because I always talk about how much I love Swedish defensemen for the reasons that they're doing well here, is that they're usually good at both ends of the ice.
smart players.
They're usually really smart players. The Swedish game, if you're a good Swedish player, heavily relies on that. Same with the Finnish game as well. The very two-way focused hockey from both of those countries.
Detail oriented.
Yeah, and it shows. And it's really nice that we have three Swedish guys who are making an impact, right? It wasn't just like Robert Haig back in the day, right? Like our Robert Haig today is Adam Yinning, right? Who is potentially better than Haig in the strength department, right? Haig is not a bad defenseman, but you hope Yinning could be a little bit more than that. You hope Helge Grans can be a little bit more than that. In the case of Andre, I thought it was really, I forget who asked the question. It might have been Jordan Hall. It was hard to see hear the audio of the questions, but they did ask about Zamula. And with a guy like Zamula, does that interfere with Andre? And he kind of like brushed that off as if it wasn't like, it's like not related, where we kind of thought it was. And maybe it still is, but they're kind of on the mindset. They're really high on Andre, like calling him dominant. Amongst these guys. And I was rewatching the game. While the team didn't do spectacular things in those games, they were out muscled a lot, like I was saying. They had a lot of in and outs, like they would go into the zone, they miss a shot or get blocked.
No sustained pressure, right?
Yeah, sustained pressure was awful. But if you look at the poise that Andre showed, it's there. Especially for a guy who's undersized.
His first pass, man, it's really nice.
Yeah, and he never looked rattled. Like at any point during that game, did he obviously drew some calls. And for a guy who's not that big, it was really impressive, I have to say. And it does make me think that, maybe it's Zamula and Andre make the team. And maybe they try to go with those 8 defensemen like we mentioned a while back.
It'll be interesting. I mean, I think Briere kind of put it nicely, saying that it's going to be up to the player. So I think that shows me that these guys will have an opportunity. Like if they earn a spot, they will get a spot where it's not going to be like, okay, we're trying to compete or something and we can't have too many young guys. Like I think the Flyers, this is a rebuild development type year where they're going to want these young guys to get their reps in. And for Andre, doing so well and being kind of referred to as dominant, that's not surprising, right? Like for me, at least, I just think that he's had a lot of SHL pro experience, and like that is not a bad league. It's one of the top leagues in the world. For him to play, top minutes in the SHL and run a power play in that league, that's equivalent to the AHL in my mind. So I don't think it's very far off that he's knocking on the NHL doorstep here. I'm just interested to see kind of how he progresses through camp now and the preseason games, if we see more flashes of the offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more comment here on the Torts. I'm sorry, on the press conference is something that he said about Tortorella. And I thought it was interesting that Briere admitted that he himself thought, prior to really getting to know Tortorella, that thought he was a veteran type of coach. And he said as he's gotten to know him, he's kind of like, no, he really is like, whoever's the better player, I will play. And he says that he's seen that. So for anybody who's worried that these young guys will not get an opportunity to play, that will not get that. Sorry, I got a phone call here. That that do not have the opportunity to play, that do not have the opportunity to kind of make a name for themselves. I don't think Tortorella is approaching that this way, regardless of their age. You mentioned this a few times already that Tortorella had to temper himself about Forrester because he's already writing him in, penciling him into
Yeah.
the roster the following year, and he's the youngest guy of the group.
That's hilarious. I was just going to mention that, like, if you look at how he handled Forrester last season, I mean, he didn't care that he was, 21 years old. He thought that, oh, he's playing really well, and I'm
He's
going to
got what I
want to play
like.
him due to that. It's not really about the age. It's about, are you ready? Can you contribute? Can you make a difference for me in my lineup, right?
And it also ties into the Shane Pinto rumors, where if you look at the way Shane Pinto plays, where I'm not saying that Pinto and Forrester are the same type of player, but again, it's a big, strong guy, and a guy like Tortorella. I've said it over and over again, and I don't care if people don't care. Size matters in the NHL. All right, so I had a couple minor technical difficulty there, lost connection for a second there. So hopefully didn't lose too much. I think it was only a little snippet there. So we'll just go right into the next topic. Okay, this was something that came out right before we went live. The Philadelphia Flyers have now released their training camp schedule and their roster. Vasili, I'll go through the roster real quick, and then maybe you read out the schedule
Yeah,
for
sounds good.
everybody. Okay. So again, this is going to be pretty straightforward. I don't really think there's many surprises here, but I'll go through the forwards, the defenseman, and the goaltender, and then Vasily will give you the rundown on the upcoming schedule, because that's actually, I would say, more exciting, the schedule, than the actual players. There's not that many surprises on here. So the forwards, we have Wade Allison, Cam Atkinson, J.R. Avon, who we know is injured for a little bit, but obviously he will be back. Denver Barkey. And again, this is training camp overall. Jordy Belleve, who's a part of the team last season. I believe I'm saying his name right. Bobby Brink, Matt Brown, Adam Brooks, who obviously had a big role for the Phantoms last year as well. Noah Cates, we all know and love. Sean Couturier, can't be more excited to see this guy play. I'm like so freaking fired up. Nick Delorier, Elliot Denoyer. Wow. Ooh, never realized how close that sounds. Joel Farabee, Jonathan Fouchon, Tyson Forrester, Morgan Frost, Brandon Fury, Rhett Gardner. Again, another newcomer. He will be a big, I guess, veteran for the Phantoms. He's 27, I believe. Jacob Gauthier, Alexis Gendron will still be at training camp here. Garrett Hathaway, a newcomer. Travis Konechny, super excited to see where he is. Tanner Lazinski, another guy I really want to see rebound. I do not want to see Tanner Lazinski just disappear. Scott Lawton, Ule Lichel, Cooper Maruti. Again, Maruti probably will be a big part of that Phantom squad this year. Ryan Paling, the newcomer, Owen Tippett, Samu Tuamala, and Zayd Wisdom. The defensemen will be Ronnie Attard, Louis Belpedio, Oliver Bonk. I really want to see him amongst the entire group. I'm interested to see how he does, because he did look good. Adam Ginning, Helge Grans, Adam Karashik, Mateo Mann, who's also injured right now. Not sure on the term of his injury.
Yeah, I don't think much was released, but
yeah, but he is injured right now. Victor Mete, another newcomer, a guy who might actually stick in camp longer than people anticipate, a guy with NHL potential. Mason Millman, Rasmus Ristolainen, our boy Ethan Sampson, Travis Sanheim, Sam Sedley, Nick Seeler, Carter Sutherland, Mark Stahl, somebody I really want to see where he's at in his game. Sean Walker. And the more I think about it, dude, I could totally see Stahl and York getting time at preseason. Sean Walker, Cam York, Igor Zamula, and Will Zmolik. And then the goaltenders, Carson Bjarnson, Samuel Ersson, Carter Hart, Nolan Mayer, Cal Peterson, and Felix Sandstrom. So no surprises there. But again, a full list of players, and I'm just excited to see them all together. That list will obviously be cut down tremendously as we move through training camp. Any comments you want to make on the roster before we move into schedule?
No, nothing crazy. I did actually just want to mention about the goaltenders. One tidbit we forgot about Briere's press conference is Briere did mention that Carter Hart is the starting goalie.
Oh, yes. Good point.
Yeah, and he said it was essentially a battle for the backup job between Pettersson, Ersson, and Sandstrom. So I just thought that was something to put out there just so everybody's aware, that the brass, is ready to go with Hart as a starter, and then there's going to be a lot of competition, obviously, for the backup role. So that'll be an interesting battle to keep an eye out as training camp starts off here.
I'm sorry, Kale, but I'm really happy he said that. The fact that it even needs to be said blows my mind.
Yeah,
And the amount
of
of haters I have seen for Carter Hart since this Hockey Canada thing, like say what you will about the incident. Again, I don't want to comment on that.
Yeah.
But the talent level, the way, like, look at Carson Bjarnson, okay, who obviously is a good young goaltender at 18 years old. Carter Hart was much better than him at the same age. Like, people need to recognize what we have, what he is, and if you don't think he's a young star, I don't know what to tell you. Goaltenders can't do more than what he has done. Look at the other young goaltenders,
especially on a bad team. So,
and Shesterkin came into the league older. Like, a lot of he's old. This is not just an average player. This is a potential superstar in the league. So the fact that we even have to say that, I think it's a little crazy. I think maybe majority of it is because of the Hockey Canada thing.
Oh, for sure. That's why he addressed it, in my opinion. But it's good for him.
And says he knows nothing about it, not more than we do.
Yeah, it's good for him to mention that. Yeah, actually, I think I actually have the quote of what Briere says exactly. He said, we've asked about Hockey Canada, but we don't know much. We're not being told much. They're still investigating. I have no clue. I thought something would have been done by the summer. We're like everyone else. We're waiting to see what happens. So I think, that goes back to kind of what we said about it last week. Like, we shouldn't jump to conclusions on Hart just because, the investigation's pending. There's really no evidence. And it's good that Briere kind of just mentions that Hart's the starter and that we should expect him, to be the starter moving ahead here. So kind of clear some things up.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no problem. So let me get into the schedule here. We'll dive in. It's a pretty big schedule, obviously, with all the training camp and preseason games. So there's going to be a lot to keep an eye on throughout the next couple weeks. Camp does technically start Thursday, September 21st, though players will be doing their medicals tomorrow and things like that. So maybe we'll get some media availabilities out of that with some players, I wonder. So something to keep an eye on for some of the fans. But yeah, so Thursday, September 21st, camp officially kicks off. 8:30 a.m. Team 1 will practice at the Flyers rink. 9:30 a.m. Team 2 practices at the Phantoms rink. 10:30 a.m. Team 3 practices at the Flyers rink. I believe those will all be open to the public.
Yep.
Day 1 might not be the best day to attend. I don't know how many pucks we're going to see on the ice. So if you're a fan, just keep that in mind there. You might just be watching a bag skate. But yeah. So Friday, September 22nd, the second day, Team 1 will have a practice. Then they'll scrimmage versus Team 2 at around 10. Around 11, there's an off-ice workout. Team 2, they'll have their scrimmage versus Team 1 at 10:10. 11:20, they'll scrimmage versus Team 3 in the Flyers rink. Then 12:20 off-ice workouts. Then Team 3, they'll do a scrimmage at 11:20, as I already mentioned. They'll practice at 12:30 on the 22nd there, and then 1:30 they'll have an off-ice workout. The Saturday, September the 23rd, there'll be a bunch of practices for Team 3, Team 1, and 2. They'll all have scrimmages amongst each other, then some off-ice workouts as well. Sunday, September 24th, once again, the same kind of deal. There'll be a Team 1, Team 2, Team 3 split where they all individually practice. They'll scrimmage against one another and then have their off-ice workouts. And then the schedule kind of switches up a bit once the preseason begins. So the Flyers will start their preseason Monday, September 25th. They'll have a game day at New Jersey. So they'll have the game group at the Flyers rink. Non-game group will be practicing on those days. The 26th of September, which is a Tuesday, is a day off. Wednesday, September 27th, it's a similar thing. They have a game at the Islanders. The game group will do a little bit of a pre-game skate. The non-game groups will practice in the Phantoms rink. Thursday, September 28th, there'll be practices at the Flyers rink and the Phantoms rink. I'm assuming this is where you get the roster cut down a bit. And then September 29th, you have a game against Boston. It's the same kind of deal as the other game days. You get the game group practicing and the non-game group doing their own practices at the Phantoms rink. Then September 30th, you have another preseason game against the Devils. Game group does a pregame skate. Non-game group practices at the Phantoms rink. Sunday, October 1st, you have a full practice. Monday, October 2nd, another game against the Bruins. Game group will practice on the Flyers rink, non-game groups on the Phantoms rinks. Tuesday, October 3rd is a day off. Wednesday, October 4th is a full practice, and Thursday, October 5th is the final preseason game against the Islanders. And game group will practice in the Flyers rink. Non-game group will practice at the Phantoms rink. So that's a very big schedule that I just read out. That was fun.
Yeah,
But
no,
there's
it was great.
there's a lot of practices obviously upcoming. So fans, I'm assuming a lot of these will be open to the public, so there'll be a chance to go check a lot of these guys out if you're kind of interested in seeing them in person. So that should be fun for Flyers fans to kind of dig into there.
Absolutely. And I'll be trying to make some of those practices. So potentially I'll be there taking pictures or doing video. But mostly, honestly, the best part about practice is just talking to the other media folks in the media room, talking to Bill Meltzer and Jim Jackson and even Charlie O'Connor, right? Like all those guys are up there on a very regular basis. So, and Jordan Hall, who's there for like everything, who's like the
great
sweet
guy.
dude, like the sweetest guy. They're all very nice. And obviously we love Bill and Jim. You guys have seen them all, but Jordan Hall is like the nicest dude. I remember a few years back when he got caught in that camera moment where somebody in the locker room farted, and he looked back at Taryn Hatcher and gave her like this look, and then everybody started calling him like a creeper for giving Taryn Hatcher. It's like, that is so far from Jordan Hall.
And took it out of context.
Oh my God. He was
hilarious.
Just reacting to a fart. And like the way the internet works is like absolutely insane. So, and be honest with you, and I actually wrote to Jordan about this. His takes, they're not like Homer positive, but he's always trying to point out like the cool things and the positive things about what you're looking at. And it's like he's the first one to have a video of Sean Couturier and just be like, hey, Couturier and Cam Atkinson are battling for space, like get excited, right? So he's a really good guy for that.
He covers the team like in a great way, in my opinion, and just getting to talk to him at the draft, great guy. And it's great to have somebody also kind of look at more of the positive side of things always versus the negative, which kind of with social media you can get into a bunch. It's good to just have a fair assessment, both sides, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into our second to last topic. This one has been talked about quite a bit. This has been probably the biggest story in the NHL of late, and that's Mike Babcock. I don't want to dig too much into Babcock. I do want to play a snippet here from Spit and Chicklets that they released today. This is just a clip from their episode regarding Mike Babcock. So I'm going to share my screen. It's under 2 minutes, so it's not going to take very long. I think it's like a minute and a half of Biz talking about it. And then I do want to kind of make a statement about Babcock. And again, I want to remind the people who are listening to this, Babcock is not Tortorella. For those who will try to search for other guys who are, we tend to have these witch hunts after stuff like this happens. He has a very long history of this type of behavior. This is this has been every single team, including even the NCAA team that he was coaching. He has left with a bad taste in their mouth. Sure, I'm sure you can find some people who like him, but I find him very questionable as a person. And personally, I don't want to see him coach in the NHL. Again, these are all alleged. Everything's alleged. We don't know anything for sure, but just want to remind people. So I'm going to cue it up here. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up. All right. I'll do a full screen.
Last week, we said what we said in the podcast, and obviously we were very animated about it, and we did so based on what I had heard at that point. Never did I call for Babcock to get fired on the last podcast. I didn't give a flying if he stuck around. Babcock's future didn't lie in my hands. It lied in the hands of the younger players, in which he did even worse to that didn't come out and that still has been under wraps, in which probably because they want to protect these guys and just what they should be doing, focusing on hockey. My biggest ask here moving forward is any media member that steps around the team, don't ask them about this anymore. Leave these players alone. This happened before training camp. The right guy is in the position now in Pascal Vincent. If you're thinking, oh, this is cancel culture. No, this is a guy who's been known to do this doing the exact same after going away for 4 years who just didn't learn his lesson. This guy he does not deserve to be around the game. He doesn't deserve to be around these kids and especially have control of their futures in the palm of his hands, in which he seems to really flex that power dynamic, has in the past, and will continue to do it if you give him another job. We don't want to see these younger players go through this bullshit anymore. And we think that with this situation coming out, it's going to send a message to that old boys club, the ones that are still around, that if you do step out of line again, we're going to fucking bend you over. No spit, no lube, sandpaper finish. That's it. That's all I got to say on the subject.
All right.
Great.
It's obviously very emotional. Look, you guys got to realize these guys are friends with 90% of the league. We don't even know what they heard, right? Yep. But even what I have heard about the guy over the years, and you even go back to like the Mike Modano story. And actually, I was just watching a recap of that, and I even noticed like Jeremy Roenick, who obviously is a former teammate of Mike Modano on Team USA, like this video where Babcock stopped him for what goddamn reason from hitting 1,500 games. Like, this guy has a history, and I want to point this out. I'm not a doctor in any kind of way. I don't, I'm not an expert on this topic, but I know a sociopath when I see one. And here's the definition of a sociopath. An antisocial personality, sometimes called sociopathy, is a mental health condition in which a person consistently shows no regard for right and wrong and ignores the rights and feelings of others. I think without a doubt that explains Babcock. Like, say whatever you want about him being talented, about him knowing the game, about his history. Sociopaths do not belong in the workplace unless they can somehow control themselves. Maybe seek some mental help. I don't know. Again, everything we hear, I can say allegedly, but I'll say this. And it's the one thing that really bothered me about this case more than anything. And we had a commenter point this out, and he is an ex-police officer. I'm not going to call him out. But he kind of made the casual thing. You want to see my phone, you better get a warrant, right? And shout out to you for pointing that out. My thing is, you are taking people's phone. This is not just an unethical thing. This stems into legality issues. You have zero right as an employer, as a boss, to hold somebody's, one, private property, two, this is not school anymore. These are adults. To hold that property and go through it, that is against the law. You're in Columbus. I know the law in America. It's against the law to do that. So in my opinion, the one thing, and shout out to SDPN, who they actually go check out their podcast with Steve Dangle, Adam Wilde, and Jesse Blake. Like, they actually went through this more thoroughly than we are. They went through his entire history of bad behavior. The idea that this guy is just leaving, in my opinion, and he is just leaving because they're parting ways. I don't think that this is the end of this. I think that this is a legal issue. I think the NHLPA, if they're smart, will jump on it. I don't know why you would pay this guy money at all for, in my opinion, breaking the law. Why you would have to pay him $8 million after he did something that is beyond me. And even if his terminology, he referred to himself as a distraction from the team. No. Don't give me that lawyer speak. What you did, if true, is against the law. You didn't just cross an asshole line. You crossed a legal line. And that's the one thing that has kind of set me off. It's like, you do not have the right to break people's rights at all. And if this has been going on for long periods of time, beyond him just being mean, right? Like the Mike Modano thing, that's not illegal. You can't kick a guy out of the league for that. But if you're going through people's personal property to find leverage over them, regardless of who they are in the league, you should not be around the game at all. And to be honest with you, if it is true, and again, I don't know 100% what is true. I do trust Spit and Chicklets. I don't know, but I would imagine you will never coach in the NHL again, the AHL, the NCAA, and you're going to have to go to Russia or some other country outside of the US where they don't find that illegal or don't care about your history to coach. And he has that reputation. He might be able to go find a job, but he should not be given a job again in the NHL. Absolutely not, in my opinion. I don't care how good of it. If he crossed that line, like, imagine a Tortorella did something like that here. Like, I can't see Tortorella doing it. He doesn't need your goddamn phone. He'll look at the way you play on the ice and be like, you ain't giving me shit. You know, you're not working hard enough. You're lazy. Boom. Fine. It's mean. It's harsh, but it's legal. It's ethical. It's on the table. And that's what I understand to be Tortorella's reputation. Go ahead, Vasili, if you want to comment.
Sure. Yeah. There's really just no ethics and no line of right or wrong here for Babcock. Like, it's a complete invasion of privacy of these younger players. And it's just the behavior is showing that, you know, it's a trend with him, right? And it's happened multiple times. You know, you have the Mike Modano situation. You know, Buddy tries to scratch Chris Chelios going into an outdoor game, right? One of the would have been like the only outdoor game of his career, and he ends up playing, and then he plays like 3 minutes in the game. Just sits him on the bench the whole game.
He said he was drinking a beer.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, it's happened for years. You even have the Jason Spezza situation where he scratched him in his homecoming.
His whole family.
Exactly, right? His whole
but did he buy 50 tickets?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, these things are just being an asshole in general, right? You can't kick a guy out of the you can't kick a guy out of the game for doing that. But then when you get to the kind of the Mitch Marner situation, you know, where you have a young player confide in the coach and then he reads out like his list of hardest players. Yeah, exactly.
Set him up for that.
There's clear maliciousness, and there's clear maliciousness with what he's doing here, and it shows that there's a level of intent, and he obviously thought about this and how he's going to approach this, right? Because he does it to Gaudreau, he does it to Boone Jenner, he does it to even the GM Jarmo Kekalainen, and those three say, well, we didn't see anything wrong, he just wanted to see, you know, pictures of our family. And then when, you know, you get into the younger players, it's a complete flip of the script where apparently, you know, he's going through photos, looking at, you know, apps, doing it away from team facilities in some manner. And that's the thing that I'm most interested in. So this was put out by Elliot Friedman. So essentially what was confirmed and what kind of sparks this all in the NHLPA's investigation. So what happens here is this all comes out due to Spit and Chicklets last week. The NHLPA sends, I believe they send Ron Hainsey, and I forget who else it is. The name escapes me right now.
Wilson? What's his name?
No,
I'm thinking Zach Wilson in my head.
But either way, the name escapes me, but no worries. So they send two guys to the NHLPA. They investigate into it further. And this all comes out that Babcock went through young Blue Jackets players' phones for several minutes away from any team facility and without management's knowledge. The players privately expressed their discomfort afterwards, and then Babcock analyzed their photos, scrolled through several different applications and messages for quite some time. In his initial statement, Babcock said it was voluntary, but now it's widely reported that it was not, and players took turns getting their phones examined by him. So just looking at that, right, the fact that he did not learn his lesson whatsoever from the last experience comes into this situation before, you know, training camp even begins and does this is crazy to me.
The idea of going through people's phone that play for you, that's illegal.
Like, yeah, it's literally illegal. And I mean, like, the balls to that is just insane to me, right? Like, I just don't understand it personally. And like, you know, any boss, any individual at any job, like, for them to want to ask their technically employee to present private information, it just doesn't make any sense to me. The fact that he thought he was going to do something like this and get away with it is crazy. And I mean, I think he deserves everything that he essentially got in this situation.
It was Walsh.
Yeah, it was Marty Walsh.
Marty Walsh. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. But yeah, so Marty Walsh and Ron Hainsey were the ones that investigate there and then kind of get to the bottom of all this, that there's really more at play here. And I agree. Like, acting in this manner should ensure that he has no place to interact in the hockey world going forward whatsoever. I just think if you're going to be this type of person and act in this manner around players where, you know, it's young guys like Biz Nasty was saying, right, where, you know, these coaches have the ability to mold these people's futures and their whole careers ahead of them based on the actions that they're you know, putting forth here. And I just think a guy like Babcock and the track record that he's shown fully puts into perspective that he should not be a person coaching anybody in hockey, and he should not be a person around, you know, young players in any manner going forward. It's just unexpected. It's unacceptable behavior.
Unacceptable behavior. Totally. Try to do that to me, Babcock.
Or
dude,
you know what I
would have done to him if he would have tried to do that to me?
I would just say
I
no.
understand the law. I'd be like,
no.
I would I would have done a lot worse than those players. Like Babcock would be in a much worse situation if it was me. I'll tell you right now, you see how I reacted, how I understand legality. I understand what my rights are. Like just because I work for your organization,
players could technically sue. They could technically sue. I mean, I
don't think they want it publicly.
But... Yeah, exactly. But that's what the Blue Jackets are trying to avoid, right? They want to get ahead of it and hopefully not have that happen. Focus on hockey going forward. But like you said, right, with the NHLPA involved, the NHL and NHLPA, they work in tandem. They are not the same organization. They are two separate entities. The NHLPA has the interests of the players. The NHL has the interests of the teams and the owners. And you could damn well believe the NHLPA is going to look to do right by their players. So if players ultimately want to pursue legal action down the line here for something that was done to them that is 100% illegal, I mean, I don't see any reason why the NHLPA can't go ahead with that and probably, have a big win on their hands, because if you look at all the evidence, it points to Babcock being in the wrong 100%.
But I think Biz said it the best, especially at the end of that speech. It's like, this is a call to again, we don't know everybody in the NHL. We don't know them personally.
Yeah.
If anybody even thinks to do this to anyone in the league, anything like this, no. Unacceptable. Is absolutely unacceptable. And I appreciate that what Spit and Chicklets did here. I'm really proud of them for not backing down from it, because if they did, it would have just gone away. And this one is unacceptable. Like, again, you can make the case with me, even with the Mitch Marner thing, that he's a meanie. Okay, he's an asshole. Just fire him. Whatever. But no, this completely, again, I don't know if I have the story 100% correct. So again, allegedly. But if that is the case, that he's taking people's phones, looking through their text messages, dude, you better be careful.
That's a huge invasion of privacy.
Yeah, this is not over for you. If he better go and hide. And the fact that he even is walking away with money, that bothers the shit out of me, because people don't really look at this stuff, right? Because to everybody, money is kind of just this fake thing, and it's really not. You look at the amount of money that a small market team is about to lose on him.
$8 million.
That is most likely people's jobs. Teams have to balance budget, and if they are not in the green, they're in the red, and people lose money, and they happen to be $4 million under this year or whatever, somebody gets fired and Babcock walks away with money after doing this. And I just think that's so unacceptable. And look, I don't usually rally to put people in jail or to go after them legally. I don't think he's going to jail or anything like that. But like, I'm not usually for that stuff, but this one really got under my skin. It really bothered me. The invasion of privacy to try to find leverage over people while digging into their text messages, their private things that they never expect anybody to go through outside of themselves. And if you even look at Apple, the United States government has asked them countless times for information on U.S. citizens. They always refuse. Why? Because the breach of privacy is everything, especially in America. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So screw you, and may you enjoy what you had of hockey, but I really hope to never see you around the NHL again. That's
and I think the silver lining is, now that this has all happened, I think it kind of puts a bow on the fact that, you had a once great coach and his legacy is now tarnished. And based on the actions that, he's done here and the actions that, he's done to these young players, I think it's well deserved that it's tarnished. And he isn't considered as one of the best coaches ever. Agreed. Moving ahead. You don't deserve any positive legacy when you're acting in this way. I'll say this: if you look at that Detroit Red Wings team, they're so goddamn good on paper. They didn't need him to be the coach to win that cup, man.
Exactly. Who the hell said that he's the reason they won the cup? He didn't do it anywhere else. It's not Scotty Bowman.
He said he's the reason that. Right, but like, if you ask any player on that team, they'll say it's the teamwork and the team together.
Yeah, it's Zetterberg, Datsuk, Nicholas Lidstrom is the best.
Johan Franzen
of all time, like
Dominic Hasek.
Johan Franzen, a guy he abused on his team. Yeah. Like, there's a case to be made that they might have been better without him.
Yeah,
I just find his behavior so unacceptable at this point. I just can't even stand looking at his face. Okay, let's move into our last topic, and we'll end on a positive note here. And this is going to be a short one, but we just saw it today, and we both thought it was pretty cool. Brayden Schenn has been named the captain of the St. Louis Blues, and former Flyer, obviously was a big part of our team. We traded him for what is now Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost, and I'm really happy for him. He's a guy who plays with a lot of edge. He's a top 6 forward on every team in the league. And he's honestly an element that this team could use today. And I love this so much because nonstop was Brayden Schenn bashed here as being not worth a bag of pucks, not playing hard enough, and clearly none of that was true. And now he finds himself in a captaincy position. And I love that. I love a good redemption story. And I love that Brayden Schenn was not, I love that people were wrong about him. And we think about other young players on this team and the way people talk about them and how they give up on them. Brayden Schenn took a little bit longer than people liked, but again, captain of the Blues, a pretty good team that's still going to be competitive. I think it's a nice win for Brayden Schenn, and I'm happy for him.
Yeah, it's great for Shannon and the Blues. I mean, he's named 24th captain in team history. He takes over from O'Reilly, who wore the C last season before he got traded to the Leafs. And I think it's just, shows the competitiveness for Schenn, and just that he's always been that guy on the ice that, brings his all in most situations and has a competitive edge and can obviously get that out of other players around him too. And, help other players around him, get to their potential. And that's, a big part of a captain's job, right? Being able to motivate the individuals around you. And it's crazy to think, if you look at Schenn's career at this point, I think it's over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe I think 13 seasons. He has let's see here, 8 20-goal seasons in 13 years. So it just shows, right? Not too shabby of a career for him, winning the cup as well. So congrats to Schenn, on being named captain, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how he plays this year with being in that role. But,
yeah, and I think for me, when I see Brayden Schenn named captain, all I can keep thinking about is, I'm really hoping that Sean Couturier. I know Tort said no captain this year. I do believe that. I do believe the A's will be handed out, but, I would like to see Sean Couturier wear that C. I don't know if he's the right guy. I don't know for sure. Obviously, I'm not in the locker room, but he was one of those 2 young guys that we had that were up and coming, and Coots is the better player of the 2, in my opinion. I think he definitely is the better player, and he's also heart and soul leader, and we will see, assuming he's going to be healthy, what an impact he does have on this team. And I'd like to see Coots wear C as well.
Yeah, I think Couturier, for me, if you're going to name a captain, that's a no-brainer. Just all he's done for the Flyers organization, the type of way he plays, his attitude on the ice, just his impact. And similar to Schenn, right? They're guys that you can kind of point to and lead by example type players, but also players that have a voice and are able to motivate the guys sitting next to them in the room as well. So, you have to cut a fine line as a captain, and I'd love to see Coots get that opportunity down the line. I think it probably won't be this season, as you said, Yariv, probably next year, if that's the case, and that's who they decide to go with. But I think that would be great. And just to correct myself, actually, Schenn, he had 7 20-goal seasons in 12 years, so I missed the one number there, but that's okay.
That's not bad. And he was, now scoring is up in the NHL, and he was doing that when we didn't have a slew of 50-goal scorers a year.
Yeah.
That wasn't happening. For those who have just started watching hockey over the past few years, scoring was down up until a lot of these rule changes have kind of the influx of talent in the NHL, which I don't know if people realize, but the NHL is more full of talent than it's ever been. I can't remember the last time I saw a Crosby, a McDavid, and a Bedard in the league all at once.
But you still got Ovechkin lying around too,
Yeah. Yeah. And again, those are the aging vets are still doing great. The in prime, top players, we know them: Kirill Kaprizov, Draisaitl, right? Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, all those guys lighten it up. And then you even have another slew of superstars coming in with Jack Hughes and Bedard, and obviously the players that are coming this year. And then, we'll see Michkov in the league. So this league is loaded. All right. That's a great episode. We're close to 2 hours again. We cannot go. We're not good at going short at all. You all right?
Yeah. Dying a little bit here.
Yeah, no problem. Anything you want to tell people about as we exit?
No, just continue to look out for articles, flyersnitty-gritty.com and Daily Faceoff, and I'm gonna have some season preview stuff coming out for Flyers Nitty in the next couple weeks as training camp gears up here.
All right. Sounds good. And yeah, again, for everybody who's listening, we will be doing more content. We're trying. So we did the rookie game video. We're going to be doing more stuff like that, Vasili and I. And even if our schedules don't align, we're going to be doing videos individually. We'll do more stuff throughout the year just to try to keep more content, in between games. Still going to do the one episode a week for the full, 92-hour podcast. But we'll try to do some shorter videos to fill the void in between. Just a reminder again, everybody, to like, subscribe, share, go to our iTunes, Spotify, give us a rating if you can. Give us 5 stars if you're willing to. It'd be amazing. Keep the comments coming, keep the messages coming. All that stuff is so awesome. We look at it every day and we get so excited by it. And again, our goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season. We're really hoping to do that. And we could use all your help. So those of you who listen on a regular basis, if you're not subscribed, or those of you who just found this, please subscribe. It's a humongous boost to us. It's really all we ask of people is for the subscription, which again costs you nothing. So please do that. All right. Yeah, again, we're super excited. Season is upon us. And next time we record this, we'll have some serious stuff to talk about, even beyond what we talks about today.
Yeah, preseason games, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, dude, I cannot wait for that. When you were reading out the schedule, I was like getting so fired up.
It's going to be great to have hockey back, and thanks, everybody for sticking with us through the previous seasons. We're going to have some good content coming up this season as well.
Hell yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. We love you. And remember, always stay gritty.